how to rethink our cities using these fantastic tools that are the SDGs. Yesterday, we focused on 2 sessions that were dedicated to the social aspects of rebuilding a cities. We talked about culture, values, and also we debated about inclusion. I have with me Emilia, that is one of the co-organizers of the event, the Secretary General of UCLG. Emilia, if we want to just wrap up what we said in bullet points in a nutshell yesterday, what would you say?
Yes, well, there were too many things to cover in just a second, but I will do my best. I think there were certainly some highlights. We have learned that despite the crisis that we are going through, the health crisis that is not over yet, we still find the Sustainable Development Goals as a very good framework to get our societies ready for transformation. And I think yesterday this came up very clearly. We also learned that some of the temporary measures that we have taken during the COVID and to address the crisis are measures that are probably that should transform into policy, and that should guide the type of local service provision that we are defining in the future. And there are some great opportunities there to be found, but there are also some challenges that we need to address. Some of the challenges that we are finding is around the need to have governance evolve. Regaining trust, which was the topic of last year, is coming back very much to the stage, but also a different type of local finance will be necessary to define a new infrastructure that needs to be seen in a little bit of a longer time span than we are used to, and that was a very interesting discussion. We also had human rights or rights-based approaches coming back to the scene very strongly as an articulator of many of these services provision. And finally, there was a push from all of us, this community of localizers, as we call ourselves, this movement to be smart, to trigger a shift in the script, to come together and strategize about what kind of arguments we want to build to make sure that all spheres of governments, but also the international community, makes the shift with us, having the high-level political forum in mind, but also other fora that are very relevant, like the review of the new urban agenda, Stockholm Plus 50, and the World Urban Forum. So this is it in a nutshell. A very rich discussion that was accompanied by true cases from the ground, which we really enjoyed, like Bogota, like La Paz, and so many cities and actors that accompanied us. So that's how I would leave it here.
Thank you very much. I think you said everything. I want also to recall the fact that during this annual gathering of the Local for Action Hub, we had a couple of experiences for each session, because we were talking about inclusion, and then we had the Diputació de Barcelona and FAMSI that are innovators on this issue. And also in the other session, when we were talking about you know, the culture as a new narrative through the SDGs, we had the city of Xi'an as another example. We didn't have what we talked also about Bilbao, because the Charter of Value is another great creation of our cities that are directly involved as innovators and accelerators of the SDGs localization in the city. So I think that having also this gathering, what we can really share and promote this concrete example can be really interesting, not only for the cities themselves that can have this exchange, but also for the other stakeholders, because we had other example provided by the rest of the society that can complement what the cities are doing.
Yes, and one that I forgot, which I think is very interesting also, if we link it up with with concepts like that we've known before, like circular economy, was circular culture that comes straight from our culture summit in Izmir. And it's a concept that we are starting to explore. There are concepts that are coming from one sector, but that are permeating in other sectors. And we had interesting conversations following the meeting in our networking event this morning about, like, for instance, municipal feminism and how the gender perspective is going to be influencing how we look at cities, how we govern them, but also how we design them now. So yes, a very, very valuable experiences overall.
And I think that from Venice, being this innovative lab with informal ideas, we will be ready to make the new recommendation to the HLPF coming from this huge debate. So today we are moving on. We have other two sessions. Yesterday was the social aspects. Right now we are going to the spatial dimension. And let me thank for being here, and let me introduce the next moderator of the yellow session, that is David Jackson, Director Local Transformative Finance from United Nations Capital Development Funds. Thank you, David, for being with us. And we will give you the floor. The session is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much indeed, Carla, and welcome everybody. So this is a subject very close to my heart, transforming a new sustainable mobility. And just to connect it with what Emilia and was saying earlier, you know, the freedom of the city, the freedom to move around is a key part of human life, particularly in urban settlements. I remember as a boy walking out with my pocket money in my hand with a subsidized public transport system. And that is a part of a freedom that you have growing up in a city. Did my sister have the same freedom? Is a question that one can always ask. Also, in an earlier existence, I was talking to some of the colleagues here earlier, I actually drove the trains on the London Underground as a job. So a day and night, and you see all of human life doing something like that. But really, sustainable mobility and inclusive mobility is a key feature of urbanization in both the global north and the global south. And later on, I hope we can discuss some ways that we can invest to make this happen. But mobility needs to be safe, it needs to be affordable, it needs to be relatively quick, and it also needs to ensure the rights of those who are working in it, those who are doing the driving are protected. And we also have questions to look at about the kind of Uber model of mobility. It also requires a lot of investment and long-term investment. And we now see around the world cities with 1, 2, 3 million people in them that do not have yet public transport systems at all. So mobility actually becomes highly compromised. And then there are safety and security issues, and there are also inclusion-exclusion issues with who is able to travel around. So with all of that in our minds, and thinking about the cities that we know and the rural areas that we know and the mobility challenges we face, I would like to invite Richard Seshi, who is the lead Africa Dunia Payment founder from Cool Lion Africa, who is going to talk about the city of Da Nang in Ivory Coast for around about 10 minutes. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from you, Richard, about how you address these issues that I've mentioned in Da Nang. Over to you. And I'm going to be quite tough, so you have exactly 10 minutes, not a second longer or not a second shorter. The floor is yours.
Today for this session. So introducing myself, I am Richard Seshi, and I am acting as a technical advisor for the city of Da Nang, which is a small city on the western side of Côte d'Ivoire in West Africa. So basically in Da Nang we have a little bit under 110,000 inhabitants, but specifically for Côte d'Ivoire, we have one of the highest mortality rates. In 2017, we had 617 maternal deaths per 100,000 persons. And this actually has always been front and center, recognized as a public health matter and subject that needed to be addressed. Interestingly, also in Danane, we have a higher occurrence in terms of debt, maternal and child debt, compared to the national average. So what we did basically with Danane is that we were thinking about a way where the city could actually improve or facilitate mobility for pregnant women. So the thinking goes like that. We realize that according to the African World Health Organization, we need up to 4 prenatal visits that every woman during a pregnancy should be able at least 4 times during a pregnancy to be able to attend to a hospital. The idea is that it will allow, of course, her to meet a doctor so that a pregnancy could be monitored, and depending on the degree that she's facing, she could actually be able to deliver in a lower capacity hospital. If a process is at risk, then she could actually be transferred to a hospital with better infrastructure and capacity. So we realized that women being able to attend 4 prenatal visits was something of a barrier. And one of the main reasons was mobility, basically having the opportunity, because the low income population, so having the opportunity for them to be able to attend 4 times to an hospital. So the municipality decided to do something about that. And we decided to, look broadly. And so we've introduced a project in Danane, which basically has 2 aspects. The first aspect is to kind of replace the existing taxi fleets, which traditionally are old and polluted taxis. So either vehicles that are really out of age, or motorbikes, which are not always the nicest way to commute from one place to another. And we decided that we wanted this to be an integrated and inclusive mobility scheme. So we introduced a cross-subsidization model whereby the municipality will actually purchase or make available electric tricycles. So tricycles basically that are powered through electricity, and enable actually those electric tricycles to be able to actually be a sort of public transportation system that could actually run through the city, but with a caveat here that we're going to use a cross-subsidization model where the revenues that are going to be driven through these electric taxis, part of that revenue will help to subsidize the 4 prenatal visits commute that those pregnant women have to do every year. So we kind of very early stage in that venture. We've worked with notably with the Bloomberg Philanthropies initiative, and we have been able since the last few weeks to be able to roll out the a pilot demonstration project where we have close to a dozen tricycles that are currently operational in Danane, and which are able to offer transportation and to the public in general. The approach that we're using is that we're working very closely with hospital staff. We're working very closely with traditional leaders, with area leaders, and with radio. So the idea is that we kind of having a really broad communications where we actually invite pregnant women to actually come and benefit from a transportation fare card. So this transportation fare card gives them then the idea to have a rebate of up to 50% of the transportation cost that they would normally have to pay. So they can either get it at the municipality themselves, at any of the hospitals in Danane, which actually allows them to then be able to present it to any driver and to use that. Another thing that we considering also is to use those tricycles to be able to promote positive health content. So we want to be able to record informational content around health that could actually be a way to actually let people know better about how they could better manage their health, including for pregnant women. So I think wrapping up, that's what the municipality is considering. we are using a sort of public-private, I would say, model here, where the municipalities try to make the tricycles available, build the solar charging infrastructure, because electric tricycles need batteries to be refilled once or twice every day, and enables young people by giving them the tricycles that they have to repay under a rent-to-own model over some time. And we ensure that one of the requirements is that they're able to deliver a certain number of trips, subsidized trips for pregnant women. So I'll leave it to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you so much indeed, Richard, for your very timely and very substantive intervention. Really valuable. And, you know, my background is finance, local government finance, urban finance, and I really like the model that you've described. It's homegrown, and those are the type of models that we need to look at because it's homegrown, designed to provide a solution. The cross-subsidy element is in there, but the financial sustainability is also in there as well. And I think those are the three things: homegrown, cross-subsidy, but financially sustainable into the long run. And some of the data that you've provided on this initiative is extremely interesting. So I think we'll circle back to that as we move along the discussion. But you've really set the scene for the type of mobility solution and the type of approach to mobility that we need to look at for inclusive and kind of people-friendly cities. And I'd now like to pass the floor to Laura Ziliani, who is an advisor in the Directorate of Planning, Use and Evaluation in the Secretariat of Transportation and Public Works from Buenos Aires in Argentina. And so, Laura, if you could just give us your thoughts within a 5-minute time window, but also end with a question that you might have to Richard. And then at the end, I think we'll ask Richard to collect these questions and answer them. So, Laura, within 5 minutes, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I had a presentation. I don't know if it's available or not. Or I share my screen. Oh, thank you. I'm going to speak in Spanish. Thank you. I will switch to Spanish. I think it's okay. La primera cosa que acá hay una presentación muy general de Buenos Aires, que es la capital de la Argentina, una ciudad con una metrópolis de 14 millones de habitantes, 3 millones al interior, un poco como París, pero con la doble de superficie. Por si alguien conoce París, es más fácil conocer París que Buenos Aires. Voy a pasar muy rápido, por esto no tiene quizás tanto interés. Si podemos pasar a la siguiente. Me encantó la introducción que hizo el moderador, perdón que no noté el nombre, fue medio rápido, sobre la importancia de tener en cuenta muchísimos aspectos en el momento de planificar la movilidad, y parte de mi rol es ese. Y en el medio de la pandemia tuvimos la idea loca de renovar el plan estratégico de movilidad de la ciudad de Buenos Aires. En realidad la idea fue antes de la pandemia, pero tuvimos que trabajar durante la pandemia, que fue un gran desafío. Gracias, Jackson. Exacto. Y justamente trabajamos, me dijeron que presente hoy la estrategia de movilidad activa, sobre todo la bicicleta, y quería remarcar que nosotros trabajamos la bicicleta, pero con una visión transversal, no solamente para reducir emisiones o hacer una movilidad más sustentable, sino también para hacer una movilidad más inclusiva, accesible, con una visión metropolitana, segura y personalizada. Entonces todas las cuestiones de género, cuestiones de seguridad, cuestiones de accesibilidad y equidad fueron tratadas en las distintas estrategias, entre ellas la estrategia de desarrollo de la movilidad activa. Acá ve la foto, ven trabajando la matriz del plan y mi gato al lado. Bueno, pasemos a la siguiente, por favor. Gracias. Este es el impacto de la pandemia en la movilidad en Buenos Aires. Creo que pasó más o menos en todas las ciudades lo mismo. Veníamos con una trayectoria positiva, aunque tampoco era extraordinaria, pero con un aumento del transporte público, una reducción del auto particular, un aumento de las movilidades activas. y la pandemia lo que hizo es que explotaron los modos privados de movilidad, ganando tanto la bicicleta como el auto. Entonces, bueno, el desafío es aprovechar de lo bueno y cómo contenemos a lo malo que queremos contener, que es el auto particular. Sigamos, por favor. ¿Saltamos una? Sí, saltamos una, hay una anterior. Ah, estamos. Para desarrollar la bicicleta, en el primer plan estratégico de movilidad del 2010, se trabajaron 3 ejes en particular. Uno es la promoción, el cambio cultural. La promoción es clases para aprender a andar en bicicleta para los chicos en las plazas, en las escuelas. Es venta de bicicletas con tasas con préstamos, en cuotas de hasta 50 cuotas. Muchas facilidades de pago, también se trabajó con las asociaciones, el sector privado para promocionar la bicicleta, creando una red de movilidad sustentable, etc. También se inauguró el sistema público de bicicletas en 2010, con un sistema manual bastante básico, y este sistema se modernizó en 2015 y hoy tenemos 270 estaciones y se aspira a tener 400 estaciones a fines del 2022. Funciona, la verdad es que funciona muy bien este servicio. Y bueno, donde quiero meter un poco el acento son las infraestructuras, ¿no? Pasemos a la siguiente directamente. Hay una ampliación de la estructura de la red de ciclovías y de ciclovías y bicisendas en la ciudad, que es bastante impresionante, de 2010 hasta el día de la fecha, cubriendo gran parte del territorio de la ciudad, empezando por el centro y extendiéndose. Y hoy tenemos vamos a llegar a los 200, ya estamos llegando a los 270 kilómetros con una nueva avenida que se está inaugurando dentro de poco, y lo que ven en el gráfico acá que dejé, ustedes no lo ven, pero lo puse para no olvidarme yo de decirlo, es que se ve la correspondencia entre mejorar la infraestructura, hacerla más segura, y la cantidad de ciclistas que se van sumando al sistema.
60 segundos, por favor. Si puede concluir dentro de un momento.
Pasemos, esta no la voy a decir, pasemos a la siguiente. En COVID lo que nos permitió fue desarrollar las ciclovías en las avenidas. Eso lo que permitió es que se sumaran, multiplicamos por 4 la presencia de mujeres, por eso digo la visión un poco más general. Y probar esta tipología en avenidas era algo que no teníamos el ok de los políticos hasta que hubo el COVID y tuvimos que salir con estas soluciones. Y por último, los desafíos, quería mencionar, es, bueno, trabajar más con la intermodalidad, con el subte, que es el sistema de transporte que tenemos nosotros en la ciudad, el resto es nacional, entonces no podemos trabajarlo. La inclusión de barrios vulnerables, que son las favelas de Buenos Aires, también se lleva el transporte público, se lleva el ecobici, se lleva las ciclovías. Eso es un fuerte desafío que estamos trabajando ahora. Y ahora también tenemos que trabajar sobre la incorporación de la micrologística. Creo que no me olvidé de nada de lo que quería decir. La pregunta que le haría al colega de Côte d'Ivoire es cómo se toma en cuenta la necesidad de las mujeres que necesitan viajar en transporte público para realizar sus análisis médicos, que a veces tienen personas a cargo, ¿no? Niños o adultos mayores. ¿Qué tipo de solución se puede llegar a pensar para que puedan realizar ese viaje más allá de lo económico, ¿no? La posibilidad de organización familiar? Esto es una pregunta, no tengo respuesta, pero me parece que es una pregunta interesante. Gracias.
Okay, so perhaps thank you so much indeed, Laura. I also have a question for you that I'll come to in one moment, but perhaps Richard, could you very quickly in 30 seconds answer the question that Laura posed to you, if that's possible? And I assume you had a translator there. Online, you did not have a translator. Your face is telling me.
Sure. I don't speak Spanish either. Sorry.
I will do it in English, if it's okay. What do you think about the fact that the women that need to travel to go to these medical checks need to to leave the kids or the eldest people in the family with someone. So sometimes they can't. It's not just an economical problem. It's an organizational problem. I don't know if I'm clear enough.
Yeah, very good question. Before you answer, Richard, just to let all the participants know, there should be interpretation in the system. So please click on the correct button and you should be able to hear an interpretation. So over to you, Richard, briefly for your reply.
Yes, so thank you so much. I appreciate it. I would say that, I mean, in the local context, of course, it depends on countries, but in the local context, we're not pretending to be able to, we're not pretending that we're solving the whole bottlenecks. I mean, when it comes to really providing a good, a good experience for expectant moms. But one really big bottleneck that we realized was to kind of help them and facilitate them actually, attending their prenatal visits. And one way of doing that is to radically improving the commute experience, which we're trying to deliver currently in Danani. The second thing I'll add is that in addition to what you mentioned, I mean, in African families, we're kind of fortunate to have large extended families. So you can have ideally a household with, aunts, uncles, and so forth. So practically, there's always going to be someone to watch over you in big rural towns or secondary cities, not necessarily in the bigger cities. But Danani being a secondary city, I would say this is less of a concern. But that's definitely something that, of course, it's a valid and very relevant point that should be looked at from a holistic view. Thank you so much.
Richard, and that again comes back to this homegrown solutions. Societies are different, cities operate in different ways, and I think your answer reflected that a little bit. And I'd like to pose a question, but not to answer now, Laura. Let's think about it and perhaps come back to it at the end, maybe when we go to reactions from the room in Venice. And it's related to the question that you asked, Richard. So you talked about working in the favelas and the inclusion aspect of this. And what we see often where these bicycle systems are rolled out, that it's actually the middle classes who enjoy it, who like riding around on bicycles, but for whatever reason it's difficult to reach those in certain social groups that it's either too expensive or for various other reasons there's not a high level of take-up. So it doesn't necessarily benefit the whole city, the cycle lanes. It only benefits certain people. So I think this element of inclusion, of social inclusion, and the nexus between social inclusion and mobility, I think is a really important one to be considered when we look at sustainable mobility and transport. And so let's come back to that, I think, when we come to the reactions from the room. A lot of investments have gone into this space, but when one looks at the users, it's sometimes only the commuters or only certain segments of the population that are actually using these forms of transport. So thank you so much, Laura and Richard. Now I'm going to move to Mahesh Dighine, who is the environmental officer at the Municipal Corporation of Pune in India. Pune, that is a very famous and ancient city with a great tradition in thought. So, and philosophy even. So I'm really looking forward, Mahesh, to your views on this topic. And once again, you have 5 minutes. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll share my, I have a presentation. In fact, maybe if I'm allowed to make a presentation. Well,
please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sharing.
Oh, no, we don't.
Disabled.
So we don't have the presentation in advance, so please just speak to it if that's okay, Manesh. I'm sorry.
Yeah, just okay, I'll just talk it over. Welcome. This is I'm Pune City. I'm Mangesh Dighe, Environment Officer at Pune Municipal Corporation. We have a city of around 5 million people, and the city was very famous as a cycle city way back in 70s, 80s. And today it has become more of a two-wheeler and a four-wheeler city. The area of Pune city as of now has around 500 square kilometer with a population of around 5 million. And we do see the number of vehicles rising. For 5 million people, we have got around 4.1 million vehicles. So traffic mobility was the biggest issue that we did a survey way back in 2017 under the Smart City project. And 30% of the people said that transportation and mobility is the key issue for the city. Now, taking this cue forward, we went into the different policies of Government of India, the National Urban Transport Policy, the FAME policy, that is faster adoption for electric vehicles. And we had a lot of interaction with local people and different stakeholders. And we came up with different city-specific policies. One of the document is the Pune Resilience Strategies. And our focus is more on the non-motorized transport rather than the motorized transport. So with the non-motorized transport in focus, we studied the different comprehensive mobility plans that were prepared. And we have come up with a walk smart pedestrian policy. We have a Pune street program and urban street design guidelines, which have become now a mandate for a road retrofitment project within the city. We also have included Urban 95 project, which focuses into how do we develop a city for children of around 3 to 5 years age. And while transforming our streetscapes, we did some pilot projects in the smart city area. And we did transform a whole lot of streets, and we did a lot of learning from these around 2 kilometers of streets that we took under smart city. And these learnings were later on deployed to different parts of the city, where even the core area of the city, we transformed them, where the focus was to have wider footpaths and cycle track as a necessary element. So our plan is to make a street retrofit program for around 100 kilometers of the street in the city. And with different policies which are localized, we are able to do this. And we also have a bicycle master plan for the city, a parking policy also in place, and around 33 kilometers of metro rail project also as a public transport is coming up in the city. There is BRT also in place, and recently we added 150 electric buses for public transport, and these buses have gained huge popularity for the Pune city. And looking into this popularity, we have ordered for 500 more buses. So more than 25 to 30% of our public transport buses will be electric buses, which are completely noise-free, pollution-free, and people are enjoying these buses at the same rate as a normal one. With various amount of projects that we are doing all over the city, we do get attraction from different cities in India. There are a lot of visitors, and we share what we have learned through the small scale projects and the street retrofit program that we are doing. And in 2020, we also won the Pune Sustainable Transport Award. So with this short note, I'll end here. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to take that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Manesh. So I have a question for you, but before I ask it, do you have a question for Richard that you would like to pose to him? Particularly perhaps a connection between what you're doing and what he's doing in terms of mobility and access to health. Anything on the top of your mind you would like to ask him? If not, that's fine. So I've got just a question for you, and I think this is something that we can think about again when we come back to the group as a whole. Is, you know, Pune is going through three simultaneous transitions: the productive transition to build its productivity and maintain productive, the green transition, because of course you've talked about the electric buses, and it's very important to reach the net zero targets that has been announced at the COP, and then of course the urban transition. So the green and the urban transition are supposed to lead to increases in productivity, and it also increases in economic development. And I wonder if, you know, just very quickly, if you're seeing improvements in the economy of the city as a result of some of these changes. In one or two words, would you be able to answer that?
Yeah, to some extent, yes, because it is bringing into opportunities for a different field of employment, and also there is different kind of mindset into the development or retrofit program that we are doing in the city. So we do see a transformation and new opportunities that which are helping for the overall improvement of economy in Pune city.
No, thank you so much indeed. And so We're now going to go to Dionisio Gonzalez, who is Director of Advocacy and Outreach at the International Association of Public Transport. So everything you have heard must be music to your ears, Dionisio. This is your bread and butter: mobility, inclusion, and productivity, economic development, all in one package. So what have you got to say to what you've heard so far? Really looking forward to your insights.
Thank you very much, David. It's a great pleasure for us to take part in this important event. As you know, UITP is the Global Association of Sustainable Urban Mobility with 1,800 members in more than 100 countries. We are working together with authorities, with operators, with the industry to improve the quality of life in cities. And indeed, we have heard the very inspiring case of Danane, Purne and Buenos Aires. So congratulations. Those are very good examples on practical and innovative experiences on how to rethink and reshape the way urban transport systems are organized for healthier, for safer, and for more sustainable cities. We know that sustainable transport, and especially public transport, is an essential component to city living. The pandemic has changed the ways in which we move around, but I would like to say and to highlight that it has not impacted dedication and sense of community within our sector, the guardians of mobility. Yeah? And as we look forward towards a brighter future, we need to keep investing, developing, and innovating. If we continue to work together and to nurture local public services, we will for sure create better, more inclusive, safer, and resilient cities. We have to make it clear: sustainable urban transport allows everybody, regardless of the age, the financial circumstances, the physical ability, to access the wealth of urban opportunities available to them, and to ensure something that is critical, that meaning that no one and no place is left behind. Some principles that I would like to highlight, and they have been already mentioned in the previous speeches, but kind of the foundations of outstanding implementations regarding sustainable urban mobility. First is to have a vision, yeah, to share a vision at the let's say vertical and horizontal level within the city, within the regions, within the national government. The second is to have an effective governance and regulation. It's of course fundamental to have a long-term funding commitment, and but maybe the most important one is to have a strong political leadership. Yeah? And this is something where in our activities with local and regional governments, we many times see the difference between successful implementation or big failures in these regards. So all in all, this is a challenge that we can only achieve with the collaboration of all the stakeholders. So let's try to be as inclusive as public transport is, bringing everyone together. Again, we count on local, regional, and national governments, youth, women, people with disability, and urban experts to make the best of this. As committee decision makers and city officials, you are already aware, and you know that sustainable development goes hand in hand with integrated land use and transport planning. And indeed, the best mobility strategy is a good territorial plan. You have seen how public transport can be the main driver to ensure that our cities are leaders meet global challenges. With a strong focus on people, public transport and active mobility are the backbone to maintain economic and inclusive growth, supporting jobs, and unlocking housing development. Yeah? Mobility indeed plays also a role in making cities friendly, climate friendly. And that's why we advocate for public transport investments to be included into the review of all national determined contributions. It's only the case now in 30% of the countries, including this type of actions into their indices. Yeah? And just back from COP in Glasgow, and this is a question I would like to pose to Danane, a final point regarding e-mobility. Technology is there, technology is available, it's ready to help, but it's not the panacea. The way we distribute urban space is critical. It's not a question of technology, it's a question of geometry. I would like also to, as I mentioned, I would like to hear from Danane about that. And in the interest of time, I will leave it here. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much indeed. I think we'll come back in a moment to this NDC's question, which is very important, but I love it's a question of geometry. So, and I think that's a really good way to put it, to look at it in terms of public transport. It's all about nodes, vectors, lines, and connectivity in the physical sense, which brings about the connectivity in the social sense. So, Richard, do you have any answer to that question? You know, technology is not the silver bullet; cannot fix everything. And any comments from you, Richard, to what you heard from Dionisio?
Yeah, so thank you so much. It's raining here finally, so you might not maybe hear me perfectly, but I'll try to raise my voice. Yes, so I agree. I agree that technology is not really the panacea. And if you look at the way, basically, especially, I mean, in Africa and India, we have that term that we use, which is mostly related also to frugal innovation. The fact that we look within the local context and we try to use whatever options or means should be frugal in terms of rolling out new initiatives or innovations. In the case of Danane, what I would say is that we're not heavily technology dependent. We recognize that because of the nature of electric tricycles compared to fuel-powered, for example, motorbikes or taxis, there was the need to actually, not only from a climate change perspective, but also from a cost efficiency perspective, because we're speaking here of a cross-subsidization model to be looking at the best and cheapest or the lowest cost mobility option. And that was one of the reasons why we decided that introducing electric tricycles could be interesting. But beyond this, we also coping that, of course, with an understanding that we need to be able to, activate a whole ecosystem and a whole ecosystem of stakeholders. So that means, of course, involving the community, the whole medical profession that is locally grounded, the expected moms themselves. And I think that would be probably my insights that I would share. Thanks.
No, thank you so much, Richard. And I'm pleased it started raining. It sounds like you've been waiting for that for a while. We could hear you loud and clear. So it's good. We've got plenty of time. So we're going to have a great discussion from the room in Venice here, the reactions. So I'm looking forward to that. And perhaps we'll move on to the next speaker, and then I'll throw a couple of cents into for us to think about. But before then, we want to go to Bruno Lana, the Economic Affairs Officer of Sustainable Development and Human Settlements Division at the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. So I think we've heard a lot: technology, inclusion, the economic impact. Really looking forward to your inputs, Bruno, and then I think we'll have we can really pull this together and get some reactions from the room here. Over to you, Bruno.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here in this session. Everything we discussed here is very related to the approach that ECLAC is working right now, which is a conceptual framework called Big Push for Sustainability, which aims to create policies that coordinate the action of the public and private sector to foster economic development, inclusion, and improve environmental standards. We wanted to go from this concept to implementation, and we in ECLAC identified 8 sectors that can drive this big push, and mobility is one of them. And not only urban mobility is one of them, but it has close relations with other identified sectors such as the energy transition, the digital revolution, tourism, and care economy. So currently, we have a project that is working with the German cooperation on urban mobility, though it has a focus on electric buses in 4 large cities, because ECLAC has this regional and economic approach that is interested in the markets of the region and in creating industrial impulse. No? So, but we are interested, of course, in different types of solutions for smaller cities and actions that can be taken in all types of cities. And we are developing tools thinking about this. So that this is just a brief comment that I would like to make. And from our side, we have a lot of interest in how this can have an economic impact also. Generate employment, generate inclusion in terms of new jobs and better jobs, and how each city can be or producing a bus, but also producing a bike, producing a scooter, producing everything that can be related to urban mobility and to economic development. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much indeed. So let's just summarize what we've heard so far. I think, Bruno, you know, the way you listed those sectors and the the kind of interconnectivity between mobility and other fields such as energy, you know, the economy, digital, and inclusion. So perhaps to summarize, if we think of these three transitions that cities have to go through, the green transition, of course, the urban transition, particularly those that are still urbanizing, and of course, the productive transition to maintain productivity and improve living standards. You know, they're three simultaneous transitions, but they don't always play off in synergistic ways between each other. Sometimes they can be, you know, one is not necessarily helping the other. It's important that the productive transition is green, for example. But when it comes to mobility, it really does cut across those. So I'd like to summarize the following points, I think. First, in terms of mobility and inclusion. A lot of people have spoken about that, and then there are those question marks about how to ensure that, and Buenos Aires talked a little bit about this, that their mobility policy in terms of bicycle lanes and encouraging use of bicycles is one that is equally taken up in the favelas as it is in other parts of the city. So that's how to ensure the inclusion element of mobility. And there's also the public safety part of inclusion, how to ensure that cities are safe for women and girls to move around in as they are for men, how to ensure they are easily accessible for all, not just the able-bodied. So I think there's the inclusion part of mobility, which is a very strong part of it. And then there's, of course, the clean transition, the green transition, the energy part of it, you know, moving away from fossil fuels, and that goes without speaking. And I think a lot of the speakers have spoken about that. And it's important, therefore, that, as mentioned by the previous speaker, that that countries include mobility as part of their NDCs, their nationally determined contributions to the Paris Agreement. But in addition to the green transition, there's also the productive transition and the economic aspect, tourism, the care economy, and broadly speaking, local economic development. When handled right, mobility can really improve that. And there's some interesting data, nobody has mentioned it yet, but I'd like to throw it into the discussion, that it's been shown that when you have subsidized public transport, that the additional income that provides to local citizens is quite significant, because it's a very effective way of increasing people's disposable income, subsidizing transport, reducing commuting costs, and reducing the cost of visiting friends and relatives. And that extra disposable income tends to go right back into the local economy through shopping and other goods and services and food, even in restaurants, etc. So it's a real way of stimulating the local economy, is actually subsidizing transport. And that has been shown. So I'd like to put that in. But the final element that we've kind of touched on, skirted around, but we haven't really gone into, is the digital. So, I mean, there's a lot of digital platforms out there. There's the Uber platform and others, that Uber model, if you like. And again, there are pros and cons. And of course, there's a lot of within the digital industry that's pushing certain digital models of mobility. But as we've seen in many countries, the working conditions, this precarious nature of the gig economy is not always the best. And there are ways in which the digital revolution can actually not necessarily help when it comes to the other issues that we've been talking about. So it, as always, the devil is in the detail, and you know, technology is a tool. It's how that tool is used that is the answer. So I think there's some question marks there that we haven't really gone into, but we should be aware that they're out there. So with all of that, I'd like to turn to the room in Venice. We have plenty of time, and maybe Emilia, any reactions to what you've just heard so far and how it relates, in particular, to the discussions yesterday, the issue of inclusion and the feminist municipalities, the issue of investment, the investment agenda for all of this. how to make it happen. Any thoughts from your side?
Well, thank you, David, for the opportunity, and thank you to the speakers and for the great examples. But above all, for the work that they are doing every day, which is very relevant for so many different aspects of one's life. Mobility is extremely important. Its connectivity is what allows us to interact with each other. It's also an extremely polemic issue. And although most of the things that have been discussed here are discussed from a very positive perspective of change and transformation, what I am experiencing nowadays, and that's something that I feel we need to reflect about as a localization movement and community, is how do we make people aware that some of the changes that are being introduced at city level that might look like upsetting the way that you have been living up until now are positive in the longer run. And how do we make sure also, because I'm thinking about the bicycles. Not everybody experiences the introduction of bike lanes as a positive thing, let's face it. I mean, the city that I live in is having big problems because of the introduction of bike lanes. It's heavily criticized. The elected official is heavily criticized around this. The mayor is criticized about it. And that happens in Buenos Aires as well. I mean, it's everywhere where you try to transform, in Bogota, etc. There is a moment on Sunday when you close the roads and allow people to bike, which is very nice. But for the day-to-day change that you need to trigger, it's complex. The other thing, and I am thinking about the work that we carry out with Dionisio and the organization, the International Union on Public Transport, how harm the public transportation has been after this pandemic. The perception of safety in public transport is a very big deal, and is not justified really, because at the end of the day they have been, it's because of public transportation that we have been able to maintain the system going, let's say. Yeah? It has been an essential service. So I'm thinking, how can we ensure that people are aware of what the longer term plans is behind the changes that we are introducing? How can we make sure that it is a process where people can feel more involved and that they understand the longer term? Because right now, at planning purposes, in most cities of the world, there is a general critique about the changes that they are seeing, even if they are enjoying parts of it. So I'm just wondering, as international community, how can we embrace these changes, and how can we make sure that both the citizens but also other spheres of governments support this type of transformation? For me, this is the concern of a network like ours as a group. I see so many good things happening, and somehow I don't feel that the public is experiencing it as positively as one might expect.
Now, that is a great point, Emilia, and I think it's summed up by there was a proposal in a city, in New York City, in fact, recently, about a year or two ago, to have a tramway, which everybody on this panel, and a great thank you so much for your great interventions. It's very impressive to hear what's happening in cities like Buenos Aires and Pune, etc. But what I found interesting, connected to what Emilia was saying, is that there was a proposal to have a tramway, electric tramway, and it was so vehemently opposed by the residents that it was dropped. So why did they oppose it? They thought the rents would go up, the property prices would go up and they'd be priced out. The shop owners felt that they would be pushed out. People working there felt it would be a nuisance rather than a way of getting to work. And generally speaking, it was pushed out. Partly, I think, because of the way that it was going to be financed was also going to be a kind of one-off, one of these famous bankable projects, not really linked to the rest of the city either, because that was the way the finance could have been raised. So that's also an interesting angle when we talk about, investing holistically versus investing in specific things. But it's a concrete example of what you were talking about, and they dropped it. Whilst if they hadn't dropped it, it might have been presented at a meeting like this. But then that's the issue. We were presenting it at a meeting like this, but yet there was such opposition to it. And I think, given the constituency of mayors, it's a very interesting issue that you brought up. So, Carla, a lot to think about. Any thoughts from your side?
Well, of course, the time span is a concern. Obviously, because we see that the political mandates have not a long term. So things can change. Now we are experiencing the pandemic that completely changed our point of view, the sense of proximity in our cities, the need to have everything closer, to rethink at the city and the public services in a different way. But it happened by the way, without any kind of timing, without expectation. So now we need, I agree with Emilia, we need to move on a cultural movement, participation, co-creation with all the community to believe that this project must be done. We have experienced today big cities, metropolitan cities, and from what we heard, they say that they need time to implement this system. And that's a fantastic project. I believe what those speakers are doing, it's fantastic. Buenos Aires, cities all over the world, Pune. So we cannot lose what we are doing right now, but we need to be convinced on this project all together, and maybe trying to make the young generation educational training on this issue could be a solution to change our culture, and not to risk to be back to the private services. Right now in Italy, we had less use of public services because of the pandemic, but we cannot go back. So as the other cities, we are pushing on this biking, plans and so on, but it's hard sometimes. So let's move culturally to support this kind of transition.
Thank you so much, Carla. Absolutely. Let's move culturally to support this. And I think, this really takes us back to Richard, in the sense that the example that you presented, Richard, was locally driven, locally conceived, and therefore seems from your presentation to have been accepted. So I'd like to ask you to reflect a little bit on what Emilia, Carla have said, Richard. And did you find opposition to this along the lines that we've discussed, and if so, how did you overcome it? And your answer, I think, to the question from Laura was quite interesting as well, about the way in which the society meant that having somebody to look after children whilst the people went to hospital wasn't necessarily such a big issue because of the way that society is there. So any thoughts from you, Richard, particularly on this locally driven, and any opposition you might have had to the scheme that you came up with?
Well, thank you so much. I think the municipality was very conscious from the beginning that we wanted to have a process that was inclusive. And as the technical advisor of the initiative, what we, before an implementation, we tried to have a broad reach in terms of consultations with different stakeholders. So, for example, that means engaging, like I mentioned, the hospital, the medical profession, engaging the elder leaders, the traditional chiefs and the local elders. That means also consulting women-led associations, and of course the taxi association. So one thing that initially we were very conscious of was the fact that bringing a transition for taxi drivers, for example, who traditionally drive two-wheeler motorbikes or old vehicles, to embracing, for example, electric tricycles had to come with incentives and with a very clear comprehension of, they needed to also find it worthwhile in order to do this transition. So the municipality very early on decided to embrace a rent-to-own model, whereby, for example, those we will be having a sort of transition, retiring progressively the current fleet, and supporting those new drivers with those electric tricycles. So the idea was to have a 12 to 18 months tricycle replacement scheme that would allow them to be able to actually embrace this. And it's working because we were able to have the buy-in of these associations. And I would say, if I have to mention any opposition, that would be maybe the strongest opposition we had in terms of implementing so far the proof of concept. Thank you.
Very interesting response and heartening response, really. And Laura, how popular are the bikeways in Buenos Aires?
Okay, sorry, I was muted. How popular? In which way? I mean, I'm going to speak in Spanish. I'm sorry, it's easier. Pasamos de 0,4% de los viajes hechos en bicicleta a 4% en muy poco tiempo. Entonces, más populares son. Ahora, ¿qué público viaja en bicicleta? Esa es una verdadera pregunta que es súper interesante, y lo cierto es que no lo sabemos con certeza. Entonces estamos trabajando también en una manera de tenerlo más claramente definido en unas encuestas de movilidad que estamos tratando de implementar. Lo que sí sabemos es que las infraestructuras seguras suman a nuevos usuarios, pero hay ciertos usuarios, como lo dijiste muy bien, David, que quedan afuera muy probablemente por muchas razones. En los barrios vulnerables tenemos un problema que es dónde guardar la bicicleta. Todavía estamos investigando porque queremos entender bien el problema, pero no sé si ustedes ven cómo son las casas, ¿no? Generalmente hay escaleras muy chicas, no se puede poner en la calle por robo o por deterioro, entonces también tenemos que atacarnos a el guardado de la bicicleta. Por eso el sistema público de bicicletas es muy interesante, porque es gratuito la primera media hora, pero entonces, como es para media hora nada más, apuntamos a los trayectos a escuelas y al trabajo, ¿no? Trayectos cortos. Después hay abonos para usarlos los fines de semana, con más tiempo, y etcétera. Entonces, me parece que la pregunta es válida, pero no la puedo responder del todo. No sé si...
Entendí perfectamente bien. Gracias. And very interesting answer as well. Of course, the data on the usage doesn't necessarily reflect the popularity, as you quite rightly point out, and doesn't necessarily reflect the people that are using it. But also the fact that it's free for the first half hour. So that is quite significant. And that not all systems are like that. So that's very helpful. I'd like now just to go to Manesh, just briefly again, to pick up on the comments made by Emilia and Carla in terms of the cultural aspect of it. So in many places, one of the people, an ambition of somebody is to get to the point where they can drive to work in their own car and not have to sit next to somebody on the bus. And that is seen as improving your social status. Finally, you can drive to work in your own car. Are you challenging that in Pune? And are people taking up that challenge, or is that still many people's ambition to be able to drive to work in their own car? Over to you, Manish.
Yeah, as of now, what I see in the city, still that's a big challenge. People do have an aspiration to drive in their cars. But again, we do see a sizable amount of population that are using public transport for their daily commuting needs. So by introducing BRT lanes, which are dedicated lanes, we are trying to change the scenario where 50 people riding in a bus move faster than one person in the car. I think when that car person sees this happening, and even if we have to make dedicated lanes at the cost of having traffic jams on the motorized lanes, well, we are going ahead with that. So wherever possible, the road width is providing, we are redesigning our road for the buses. And also for the non-motorized transport, the bicycle lanes and the footpaths, we are redesigning our streets so that we give enough space so that we promote the non-motorized transport as the main last mile and the first mile connectivity to the public transport system. So overall, we do see a change that is slowly happening, but this change comes very slowly because first we have to introduce the pilot level projects. We have to convince the local people, have a lot of interactions with them. And once the local people around an area accept that, then I think the other areas also get interested and they want the transformation to happen. So it's a long process, but we are undergoing the transformation.
Because it's at all ends of the spectrum. So at the one hand, as we've been talking about, it's important for lower income communities to embrace these changes. Sometimes there's opposition to bicycle lanes, but also in more wealthier parts of the city, there is equal opposition. I recall when I was living in Jakarta and they brought in the BRT in a slightly more wealthier suburb, there was a big opposition. And I was talking to somebody who said, well, of course, when I was in London, I used the public transport all the time, but I would never do it in my own country, because it was seen as somehow moving down socially. So again, these challenges are always there. So, I wonder, Dionisio, advocacy and outreach at the International Association of Public Transport. So you are really at the heart of it all, and yet perhaps the visibility of this issue is not really where it should be. I mean, if we're frank, it's not on the front pages, and it's not really in the it's not in the debate. How do we raise the visibility of this issue and the visibility of this interconnectivity with the other issues? Because it's so fundamental to cities, the mobility, and it's so fundamental to human life. It's a fundamental part of our life, this ability to move around. How do we raise this and get it to where it should be on the global agenda, Dionisio?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. And thank you very much, Emilia, for recognizing the impressive work of the sector during the COVID and during the pandemic. Yeah? Because indeed, it was not the public transport decision to close the systems, the other way around. We were imposed a lot of confinements, and that's why the public transport demand, the ridership, went down up to only 10% of the usual figures. Yeah? Now we are back 75, 80% on average, and we keep saying that we are part of the solution. We are not part of the problem. We are not the problem. You say that this is not often on the newspapers. I would say that mobility is only on the covers of the newspapers where there is a problem. It's like security. It's only when there is a problem, when you notice that something is not working. Yeah, but there are millions of people moving every single day in metros, buses, trams, all around the world. Only when there is a disruption, only when there is a strike, there is an issue there. What we are doing is working together with partners, trying to make the case for public transport as an enabler to other city objectives. Yeah, it's a question of developing the economy, growing, providing access to education, providing job opportunities, and in such, let's say, of alliance is where we present ourselves as a catalyst. Yeah? There is a lot of work to do in terms of awareness, as you have already mentioned. Yeah, and in many occasions, I would say that the sector is not used to become closer to the citizens and to explain and to listen and to explain and to listen. This is also due because we have election periods of 4 years where you have to plan, you have to implement, and you have to inaugurate the line. Yeah, but there are very good examples, and the more you discuss with people, the more you explain things, the more they do understand, and then they make their own choices. Yeah? Just to make a very short example, when I was working in Madrid, the Public Transport Authority, before joining the UITP, there was a discussion with the neighbors association. Yeah? We were building a big interchange, and we have to remove literally three trees from a garden. Yeah. So there was a strong opposition. They said, no, you can do this, you can do this. So we said, okay, no worries, let's have a meeting. We went there, we explained, look, this is option A. Option B is that we will be removing 10 parking lots. You know? And they said, no, look, take the trees, take the trees. We have already enough parking lot, enough trees in the garden, but these 10 parking lots just behind and below my house, they're fundamental to me. Yeah? So it's always a question also to make them take decisions. Thank you.
No, great. That's a great point. So just before we close, I'd like to go to Bruno one more time. And so we've heard a lot, and I think coming back to the economics aspect of it, Bruno, and Dionisio there was talking about the jobs. So I mean, one of the key issues we're facing as well is this productive transition. As we need new jobs, new forms of productivity, new ways for people to earn living. And of course, local public transport is one of those. And we heard that from Richard. And these innovative ways of dealing with mobility in an inclusive way can be a great source of income and of employment. And we've also heard, the information that is out there that when you subsidize public transport in various ways, you increase people's disposable income and therefore you boost the local economy. So again, that is not something which is, and all of this will help to bring the finance in, because once you can make that case, you can make a case for in the investments. You're investing in the future of the city, and you can make that case by showing the improvement in the local economy through better mobility. So again, that's something that's a case which is not strongly made necessarily. When people talk about jobs, mobility doesn't necessarily come the first thing that comes into their mind. And this connection is not strongly enough on the agenda. So any thoughts, finally, Bruno, from your side on that as to how we can raise the visibility of the importance of this issue to local economies and therefore find a way of financing it as well. Over to you, Bruno.
Yeah, Dave, that's right. I think one issue in the region is that usually many governments try to have a financially sustainable transport system, in the sense that it must be paid with the tariff that you ask the users to pay. So all the social aspects that are related to this, and the inclusion and access to jobs and productivity that you could raise by giving some subsidy is not taken into consideration. And also in the region, there is a worry that some of this transformation might become, because there is no coordination or planning, just imports from China, to simplify that. Okay, instead of being an opportunity to develop some chains in their own country, in their own city, and using specific solutions for what the city needs. So in many aspects, this is not taken into account in the region. And our aim in ECLAC is to give more visibility to those aspects and public policy recommendations that go in this direction.
That's a great answer. That's absolutely a great answer. So I think to summarize and conclude then, as we're coming to the end of the time, absolutely right. Local value chains and local mobility are inextricably interlinked. And by making that case and putting the data on the table, and also perhaps with demonstrative investments, it'll be possible to show how this can happen. Interestingly, one of the things we're doing with an institution called the International Municipal Investment Fund is a public transport connection in a basic public transport system in Kumasi, Ghana. And that is being planned in an integrated fashion that we hope will take into account a lot of these things. And part of the rationale for it is this greater local economic development that will come about through having the tramway, and therefore will lead to greater revenues that can pay for it into the future. So the idea is it's not solely built upon, as you say, the actual ticket you pay at the door has to be the one that repays the whole project cost, because very little public transport would exist if it was funded that way round. Very interesting. The London Underground was funded through a 50-year bond, and yet the mayor of Quito could only get a 15-year loan where initially when trying to develop the Quito subway system, 15-year loan for an infrastructure that's going to last for, over 50 years. So this long-term financing has to be found, and I believe it can be found by making this case, and through these demonstrations and this kind of conversation can show why it's critical for a city to get the financing in place for this kind of long-term transport. We've also heard about the social aspect of it, the inclusion aspect of it, and mobility, if you like, is part of what makes us human. It's more than a human right. I think it's part of being human. And going back to the comment I made at the beginning, there's nothing greater than being a young person walking out of the door with some money in your pocket and having the freedom of the city. The ability to move around, do whatever you want. And not everybody has that, and that is in some places actually being cut back rather than being expanded. But this freedom to move around is part of being human. And I think that this is a very important issue. And I'm very pleased that it was on the agenda here in the which trail was it? The yellow trail. Yellow, I was trying to, one is yellow, the color of the rail tracks when it's been raining and the sun is reflecting off them or something like that. But that's been a great discussion, and I hope that it is actually going to lead the way to more in this area, and perhaps some kind of way to bring the comments together. I hope this has been recorded and maybe produce something that actually sums up some of the points that we've made, because it is a very important part of life, and it's one that is often, well, it's not often spoken about in the terms that we've spoken about it today. Thank you so much, everybody, and back to, I'm not sure back to who, but back to the next session. Thank you.
Hello to all, and welcome to our last but not least important session for this Venice City Solutions this year, when we are addressing how we find solutions in the SDGs to rethink the city. And we're going to tackle the core issue of cities, which is always planning. We wanted to have this session at the beginning of the event, because it's if you see the concept note, we go in this circle that illuminates, that goes from planning to transforming to sharing, and then back to including. So, but anyway, I think that we can take the circle in all senses. So after including, I will, in my little design here, I could have gone around, and anyway comes from the including to the planning, which should happen more than it does. But we are into it, and SDGs are helping also cities to take this consideration of including and imagining and sharing while they're planning. And today we have with us a lot of cities that are trying to do that. We have a city focus on Barcelona, which of course they are going ahead because they have put this delivery office in the mayors, and they are aligning all the priorities of the mandate of the mayor to the SDGs, which is great. But of course, we have also with us some cities that want to learn more, some cities that are experimenting. We are still in the beginning of this process, but as we have stated in this session, once that you put inside the SDGs, inside the planning process of the city, then you will have the sustainability criteria there to stay. Even when there is a political change, when there's another mayor, the SDGs will guide the future action of cities. So we have here our wonderful moderator who has traveled all the way to Venice to be with us. So allow me to introduce her. She's Aline Mata. She's a policy analyst at OECD and a colleague in the localization processes. And we're very happy to have you here with us, Aline, and thanks for coming to Venice. So over to you to moderate the session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Diana. Thank you for having me here. I couldn't be more delighted to moderate this session. And I really need to reinforce what Diana just mentioned related to this circle that we have. Since yesterday, I have been learning so much from everything that we heard. So we went from how cities are fighting inequalities, what they are doing to better address the cross-cutting approach of culture, how they are advancing mobility, and everything by the end gets back to this circle with planning, because we need to connect the dots, we need to integrate the agendas, and we need to advance the localization of the SDGs at the local level. So I have been taking some very interesting notes of the examples that we had listened so far. And I can tell you that the session that we're going to have now with the distinguished cities that we have here are going to bring us a lot of insights and food for thoughts. So without further delay, I really want to start with our city focus today. So our city focus, as Diana told you, is the city of Barcelona. So we have here with us Mr. Miquel Rodriguez Planas, who is the Commissioner for Agenda 2030. And he's going to share with us their experience, how they are advancing with planning this new officers that was created. So please, Mr. Rodriguez, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alimata. Thank you, Diana. It's really a pleasure being here and being invited to this event. So as I have just 10 minutes, I will try to explain how we are defining our strategy, how we are implementing or trying to implement the 2030 agenda in Barcelona. The first thing is that in 2019 we had a new government in the city council in the city of Barcelona, and this new government decided to have a commissioner of the 2030 agenda. This is a new representative. This is a new body in the city council, but it's very important because we clearly put the 2030 agenda as a political priority, deciding to have a commissioner and to have a whole department regarding the will to reach the 2030 agenda. From here, what we did, we defined a strategy that is based in 3 pillars. The first pillar was to decide that the city council should be leading the will to implement the 2030 agenda. We understood that we should be the one leading in the city the way to reach the agenda. We had to be an example for the rest. We had to be the ones pushing the policies into the agenda. The second pillar was to deploy this agenda into the city, to move it into the city, to make that all kind of organization in the city will be using the agenda. And the third pillar was basically what I'm doing here, to boost our international relations by sharing, benchmarking our experience, to learning from others from other cities about how they are implementing the agenda. Okay, so I'm going to focus basically on the first pillar and the second one. The first regarding the city council leading the will to reach the agenda, and also on how we're doing to make the city also embracing the agenda. So regarding the first pillar, the one of we, City Council, leading the agenda, the first thing that we had to do, and it's kind of obvious, but we had to do, is to adapt this agenda that is focused on the national level, the design on the national level, to the local level, to do the localization. That was something that we did. And what we decided to do is to do something very concrete. In that sense, what we did is we analyzed the 169 targets one by one, and we decide which ones Barcelona was able to do something and which ones were above our possibilities or were already reached in our city. So the result was that we saw that we were able to do something to adapt the agenda regarding 139 targets. That means 82% of the agenda. And it is quite a lot because, as you know, experts say that local governments, we normally localize around 66% of the agenda. We decided to localize 82%. And when we did that, what we did is for these 139 targets, one by one, we look at them and we try to adapt them to our reality. And let me just give you one example. I'm not going to give you more because we will never end it, but one example, and it's regarding target 1.1. 1.1 says something as clear as by 2030, everyone has to live with at least $1.5 per day. That's the target as is set in the agenda. To adapt this into Barcelona could be done in a very simple way, just to convert the dollars into euros and say, okay, we have the localization here, but it doesn't make any sense. In Barcelona, no one can live with $1.5 a day. Doesn't make any sense. So we thought that we had to go into the spirit of the target, and from here to adapt this target to our reality. And the spirit of the target here, we understood it's about the extreme poverty, the ones that are in the more extreme situation of poverty. So here in Barcelona, when we talk about extreme poverty, we're talking about homeless people, people that are living in the streets and that are not able to have food and shelter each night. So we adapt this target to our reality. And our reality is that by 2030, what we want to reach is that anyone in Barcelona can have a roof to sleep, has shelter, and can have food to lunch every day. So that's our transformation. And I give you just one example of localization, but we did this for 139 targets, one by one. And a very important thing is that we did it on the base of already existing strategic plans, strategic strategies that we had in the city council. And the result is that we have a very detailed document, a very detailed 2030 agenda of Barcelona with plenty of indicators, very strong KPIs that we are able to measure, that they're so strong and defined that we have already put it on the open data of SDGs, of the open data SDG platform, and it's reachable for anyone. So we're able to make our VLRs every year, evaluating how far are we from reaching the agenda. And the result is that this is something that we did. We need 1 year to do this adaptation, this localization of the agenda. We did it together with the citizens. We did the citizens a process of participation. Although we do have the pandemic and the lockdown, we were able to do it because we have a digital platform to make a participation process. And we also had the support of the academia. We have an advisory board, an academic advisory board, 30 members of the Academia of Barcelona. In Barcelona, we have around 8 universities. Some of them are top universities, top business centers, business schools. So from this academia, we have their support on how to define this agenda. Once we have this, we are starting doing the evaluation. And now this year, 1 year after, we did our second VLR. The first one was the one of localization, and the second one is the VLR on how we are going through. And the result that we see is that if we look at our KPIs, the KPIs that are measurables, that are measurables now, but they were measurables by 2015, we see that almost 60% of them are improving. So we can say in a way, and I insist in a way, that Barcelona is improving by 60% in reaching the agenda. That can be something that can be discussed about the methodology on how we're doing. I'm pretty sure of that. And if you want, we can discuss about it. But it's a first way on seeing how we're reaching the agenda. From here, next year, we're going to do a more stronger evaluation process where we want to put wages on our KPIs, wages in terms of strategy, or on impact, on which are more important than the other ones, and be able to have a more stronger evaluation. But that was just the first step. We took one more than that. That's the first step. That it's in work in progress, and that we do want to do a VLR every year. It's our goal. But another thing that we wanted to do from the Commissioner 2030 of Barcelona was to define policies that allow us to move faster to reach the agenda, because we know that we are in a decade of action, so we need to run, not just to walk. We need to run to reach the 2030 agenda. And with the pandemic, we need to run faster. So from our point of view, we're helping other departments of the city council to define policies, and we are also launching policies from our side regarding several policies. And let me just explain you one policy in that sense. We have a very strong, we want to increase by 50% the production of renewable energy in Barcelona. That is something that we have in our agenda. And so far, this is not working not very well. We basically work through grants and through direct investment. And we knew that with these policies, it will be hard to reach this 50% of increase of renewable energy produced. Therefore, we designed a new policy. This new policy, it's called Mechanism for the Energetic Sustainability of Barcelona, MES Barcelona. MES in Catalan means more. So we're talking about a project, it's called More Barcelona. And this project, what we're doing is we're investing 50 million euros from the city council, together with an investment from the private sector of around 116 million euros. And together with this total amount, 166 million euros, we will invest in the installation of solar panels in any kind of roof of the city of Barcelona, public, private, residential, tertiary, or industrial roof. And the more interesting thing here is that with this investment, this installation of solar panels will be for free for the owners. We will assume the whole investment, and we will recover the investment by selling the energy. We will sell the energy to the owners of the building if they're interested, to the neighbors of the building if they're interested, and if not, we're going to sell it to the grid. This is something that we can do. The laws of renewable energy in Spain allow us to do this. And once we recover the energy, we will give for free the solar panels to the neighbors, so they will be able to create solar communities. This is something that we just launched 6 months ago. From now, we have already more than 1,000 buildings that we're studying the possibility of install solar panel with them. We have around 12 million euros of investment ready to install panels. And this is an example on how to boost a policy to reach the 2030 agenda. So we're trying to do innovative solutions to reach the agenda. If we move to the second pillar of the strategy, and we'll be very brief here because I think it's interesting to have a conversation with the rest of the speakers. It's how to deploy the agenda into the city. To do this, the first thing that we had to do, that we do and that we will still do is in the future, is to do campaigns, publicity campaigns, to show the people what we're talking about when we talk about the agenda, how we're reaching this, and we're doing this every year, several campaigns. Another thing is we want also that companies, private companies, NGOs, organizations such as schools or others, we want them to adapt their policies, their activities into reaching the 2030 SDGs. So to do this, we have created we call a table to boost the 2030 agenda. This table contains, we have the representative of around 30 organizations from the NGOs, but also private companies and other associative organizations from the economic sector, the environmental sector, or the social sector. We want with them to think on how we can help organizations to implement the agenda. Here we're working also with a company called B Corp. B Corp is a company that is helping private companies to implement the SDGs in their company. This is a company that is already working with global impact in that sense. And also another thing that we're doing in Barcelona is we just have launched a days, let's call it a day, a forum of days about the 2030 agenda. In this forum of days, we had it yesterday and the day before. That's why yesterday I wasn't able to be in this session, Diana, as you know. In this forum of the agenda, we think about how to reach the agenda, and we show examples on how organizations are reaching the agenda. And the last thing that we're going to do, we're going to launch, we're going to create a prize of the agenda. We're going to say the prize Barcelona 2030, the 2030 agenda. This prize will be for NGOs reaching the agenda, how they're reaching the agenda, SMEs, how they're reaching the agenda, or big companies, the communication, how the newspapers are communicating the agenda, how the educative sector, the primary schools, but also the high schools and also universities are reaching the agenda. And finally, there will be a prize for other cities, how other cities are being champions on reaching the agenda, and we want to know it, to let people know about it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. This was so inspiring. I was taking several notes here, for example, what you were saying and how you're going to use the SDGs to fight poverty, how you're going to use this to provide affordable housing, promoting inclusive education, achieving a profound energy transition that's key to the challenges of our future. So it was really inspiring. I would have a lot of questions for you, but let me just now turn to our other inspiring cities that we are going to have here today. So let me turn to Ms. Laura Monzon. Laura is the Strategic Planning Coordinator of the municipality of Canelones in Uruguay. And Laura, please tell us how your institution, how you are using this Agenda 2030 to change the way that you are planning and delivering at the city level, please. Please, you have the floor.
Hola, buenas tardes para todas y todos. Muy buena la presentación de Miquel, que la conocemos un poco por el tercer pilar justamente que él nos nombró. Nosotros enviamos una presentación para acompañar un poco lo que vamos a decir. En realidad, ahí nosotros lo que estamos haciendo es explicando un poco el proceso que hicimos en realidad de incorporar lo que fueron los distintos avances que tenemos nosotros desde planificación estratégica, desde el 2005 hasta el 2018, en el que se empieza a aplicar la prospectiva. Se hace todo un trabajo de diagnóstico y de consulta técnica académica, consulta institucional y consulta social, y se fija una visión 2040, donde se reescriben las líneas estratégicas para el gobierno departamental. Acá hacerles una aclaración: el gobierno departamental en Uruguay los departamentos son la división administrativa, lo que puede ser en otro lugar provincia o estado, acá es nuestra división administrativa, el departamento. Y en esas 4 líneas que se definen de trabajo con la sociedad civil, la academia y la institucionalidad, se definen 57 metas de trabajo asociadas a esas líneas que están directamente vinculadas a los ODS y a las metas ODS. ¿Tá? Ese trabajo lo hicimos con el apoyo de PNUD durante el 2018 y en este año, en el 2021, con el nuevo gobierno que asume, se elabora el presupuesto quinquenal, se presentan casi 200 proyectos de lo que es el gobierno departamental, con todos sus proyectos asociados a las líneas estratégicas del plan estratégico y a los ODS y sus metas. En la otra imagen que tenemos un ejemplo cortito en el que se puede ver un ejemplo, en este caso, el intendente, a razón de la pandemia, definió 3 pilares. Uno es el tema de la protección de las personas que quedaron en el estado de mayor vulnerabilidad, el empleo y mantener las infraestructuras para el departamento. Entonces acá tomamos como ejemplo el empleo y cómo desde un área de trabajo hay una dirección responsable con un proyecto que toca determinadas líneas, determinadas metas, y ahí se ve reflejado en la gráfica final cómo toda esa área de trabajo toca los ODS. ¿Tá? Lo que se intentó además es que cada área de la intendencia además tocara sí o sí lo que es el ODS 5 y el ODS 10. Entonces, lo importante era que fuera transversalizado todo lo que se presentara por género y equidad. Entonces, nosotros ahora en este momento estábamos teniendo también un poco de vínculo con Barcelona, justamente para de alguna manera continuar bajando lo que son las metas más a nivel de los municipios, que es como la parte que nos estaría faltando en Canelones, pero que estamos en vías de ese trabajo. Nosotros ahora acá les dejamos también el link del documento final en el que se presenta todo este trabajo y cómo está hecha la asociación de las líneas estratégicas a los ODS con esta visión prospectiva y incorporando también todo lo que son nuestros anteriores planes estratégicos, que son parte también de todo este contexto. No sé si ya te dejo las preguntas también para Barcelona.
Sí. Please, go ahead.
Bueno, tengo varias. ¿Cuánto tiempo implicó el proceso de adaptación de las metas ODS a la ciudad? Que es como una de las cuestiones que nosotros tenemos, referidos a lo que es el pilar 1. ¿Cuántas áreas de la institución fueron involucradas? O sea, si fue solo esta área específica que se relaciona a los ODS, o fue un grupo más amplio que estuvo involucrado en llevar este trabajo. Y en relación al pilar 2, ¿qué receptividad tuvieron de la ciudadanía cuando empezaron a hacer todo este trabajo de las campañas y cómo fue ese intercambio con la ciudadanía? Porque ¿cómo fue ese intercambio?
Cal, can you please respond in 1-2 minutes, so and then we move forward, please? Just 1 second. You need to unmute yourself. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. So for the time we need for the localization, it took us 1 year, and it could have been with more time or with less time, but it took us 1 year. We expected to have it in less than 1 year, but we had the lockdown, we had the pandemic in the middle of the process of localization, so we need to we are needing more time. And who were in charge or engaged in this process? All the city council. We create a committee, an internal committee with all the areas of the city council, and they participate in this. But a very important thing when we do the localization is that we don't start from zero. When we do the localization, we look at our previous plans, previous strategic plans, sectoral previous strategic plans. This is very important because this is something that has already been done, has a design and objective by normally sometimes up to 2030 in some cases, so we can use them. And regarding the second question about how was the answer of the citizens, okay, so last year in Spain there was sorry, I don't remember the name. Anyway, there was the state of Spain asked for people about who knew about the 2030 agenda and the SDGs, and the result was that only 30% of the population knew about the SDGs and the 30 and the agenda. To me, this is not a big deal, because I think that the question is not a good question. The important thing is they know about the values, about the goals we want to be behind. And I'm pretty sure that the result here is higher, should be higher. Anyway, regarding our activities, I can, for in this forum days that we organized these 2 last days, we had more than 150 persons that wanted to come to the events. That was one thing. And another very interesting thing is that inside the city council, we see that there's a lot of people that are willing to work and to do activities by their own to reach the agenda. And this is something that has been done.
Thank you very much. This was quite interesting, and we are for sure coming back to you. But now let's hear from another city. Let's hear now from Nicolas Garbi. Nicolas Garbi is the international advisor in Madrid, Spain, but he's also here representing the UCLG local for Action Hub, Madrid. So it's really nice to have you here with us today. Thank you for joining. Could you also please explain to us how your institution is using the Agenda 2030 to change the way that you are planning and delivering, but also explain how the SDGs are inspiring your work. And of course, please feel free to also raise a question to Barcelona if you want to do so. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Hi, everybody. It's nice to be back in Venice, even if virtually. I think that this meeting has become a reference one in our world of localization. So thank you again to reiterate the invitation also for this year. And also I would like really to congratulate colleagues from Barcelona and Canelones. And I think that actually I would like just to subscribe immediately what the colleague from Barcelona just said. That the important thing is to maintain the value that are behind the SDGs. So this is really our work. So in this sense, in Madrid, we had a quite similar experience than the one that has been described by Barcelona, in the sense that we understand that this the localization process as an opportunity in reality to improve our policies within the city council and our relationship with citizens. So this is actually the first aim of our localization process. Then the second, let's say, point that is extremely important here is that we didn't want this process to be directly linked to a specific government of the city, but rather we wanted to institutionalize the process. So concretely, we started the work in terms of developing a localization strategy, that defines what is the localization understanding of the city, what is the implementation phase and the monitoring system. And we had a first, let's say, consolidated draft in 2018 with the previous government of the city. And finally, we were able to approve it with the support of all the different parts representing the city council, so not just the government, in the actual mandate that actually represent a completely opposite coalition from the previous one. So this is extremely important for us because it's the proof that we were able to institutionalize the localization process. So without thinking about what will be or not the next government in terms of political colors, we know that the city will work towards this objective until 2030. So this is really is the most important, let's say, goal that we've reached so far. Now, we approved the strategy in 2019, but together with the strategy that again, establish what is our conception, what is our implementation path, and what is our monitoring system. We also did a first work of alignment between the policies, the plans, but also the budget of the city with the SDGs targets and indicators. The level, let's say, of detail has been a level of detail that try to reach not just the performance indicator, but also outcome indicators. So we did this first exercise. It has been extremely complex. As you can imagine, we encountered the same situation as Barcelona or Canelones. So there are a lot of gaps, in terms of relevance of the targets, so relevance of the indicators, the type of detail of the indicators, etc. So after this first exercise of alignment and the adoption of the strategy, now we are in a new phase, and this new phase actually is to start to set up concretely the monitoring system, and we have been identifying some milestone that actually help us to give a frequency to the work that is actually the preparation of voluntary local review of the city. Now, here there are two things that are extremely important. One is actually to create the enabling condition to concretely do a work of localization and let's say monitoring of what we are doing in the city. And we wanted actually not to do the easy work to just report on what the municipal government is doing with its policies and investment, but actually we wanted to territorialize the process. So actually we enlarge the process to the different stakeholders that are directly through their activities and investment impacting in the territory of the municipality. So what we are doing now is setting up this ecosystem, multi-stakeholder ecosystem, understanding so SDG 17 as the real enabler SDG for our localization process, but also an accelerator of it. So that on one end, but on the other end, when we after doing this first aligning exercise, we really saw that there was also a need to have more clearness in terms of different monitoring system to follow. And we didn't want to go for our own system, but actually we wanted to support a legitimate system of monitoring. And so what we are doing is also supporting the Global Urban Monitoring Framework work that the UN Statistical Commission has asked to UN Habitat and other agencies and programs of the UN to create in order not to have a unique reference in terms of monitoring system for localization for local authorities. So this is extremely important because here you will see this local, I just end, local and global dynamics, how they influence each
Nicolas, sorry, I will ask you to wrap up, and because we are over time now, so if you could just conclude your thought, and then we come back to you again. It's just to give an opportunity.
I just concluded my talk,
okay.
So that's what's important is stakeholders, but also to work on the concrete and shared and legitimated monitoring system. So for this, we are helping global processes in order to have more efficiency at local level.
This was quite interesting, especially to hear how you were dealing with the gaps at the city level. But before, just do you also have a question to Barcelona before I move forward?
Yes, I would be really interested to understand better two things. So one, the internal governance of the process in terms of the government of the city. What is the governance system? And then what are you doing in terms of train your employees? So internal capacity development, because this is a critical issues for everybody, I guess. Thank you.
Okay, so very shortly to give the room for the rest. Regarding the internal governance, first we have a political mandate. As we create the figure of, we have a deputy mayor of the 2030 agenda and a commissioner of the 2030 agenda. This is very important because it's a mandate clearly in the city council. The second thing, as I said, we have created a coordination team within all the areas of the government, of the city council, where all the managers of the department of the city council, sorry, are in this coordination team, and we work together. We work together to do localization. We are working together to do the evaluation. So this is very important. And another important thing is that in terms of deploying new policies, such as the one I was explaining in terms of renewable energy, from our department, we are not able, and we do not wish to do it alone. We always do it together with other departments of the city council. So we do a transversal policy. In terms of internal training, we're not doing internal training, not yet. What we have done is an internal campaign to explain to workers what is our agenda, what is about our agenda, and in a very gaming way, to show them or to explain them how they can also participate in reaching this agenda. And it has been quite successful with plenty of activities from their side.
Thank you both. This was quite interesting indeed. So now let's hear from our colleague Patricia Miranda Menezes. Patricia is actually the Mayor's Office Agenda 2030 focal point at the city of Barcarena in Brazil. So Patricia, please also tell us what are you actually doing at the city level? How are you using the SDGs agenda? How it's inspiring you? And please, if you also have a question to Barcelona, feel free to raise it by the end.
Hi, hello. First of all, on behalf of Diana, Carla, and Emilia, I would like to congratulate the organizers of the event. I hope to be able to return to Venice to meet you in person again. So Aline, it's nice to see you again. So answering the first question, in Barcarena, we started to work with the Millennium Development Goals in 2013. So we adopted this agenda as a framework for the multi-year plan, 2014 and 2017.
in 2014, the mayor, he published a decree that determined that all short, medium, and long-term planning and management instruments should adopt the Millennium Development Goals as framework. So the public policies in the city started to be elaborated and updated in accordance with the Millennium Development Goals. This decree also established the incorporation of the Millennium Development Goals in all pieces of communication, which aroused the interest of the entire population in this agenda. So in order to engage all the population in this co-creation process and to qualify the debate in the elaboration of the public policies, the City Hall started a permanent process of capacity building to make it that every citizen and every public servant knew these agendas. So the mayor was re-elected for a new mandate in 2018. But before that, with the end of the Millennium Development Goals, the mayor published another decree, maintaining these strategies used in the Millennium Development Goals, only replacing the term MDGs for Agenda 2030. The innovation in this new decree was was that he assigned to the mayor's office the governance of this process in this second mandate. So with the beginning of the Agenda 2030, the mayor's office now is responsible for defining guidelines for localizing the agenda, to coordinate the dialogue between all the City Hall agents, to coordinate events and capacity buildings to democratize the agenda in the government body, in the city council, in the communities, in the schools, and other stakeholders. So for Barcarena, these are agendas, they are, like we say here in Brazil, Barcarena is a city in the Amazon region in Brazil. This is an agenda of the state and not of the government. When we speak in Brazil, this expression means that this agenda must be maintained regardless with the political group that is in power. So that's why the institutionalization of the agendas is considered a strategic action to the municipality of Barcarena. And the SDGs, responding to the second question made by Aline, so the SDGs inspires our actions by showing us the path towards a better future. It's like that famous poem that says that utopia is on the horizon to make us walk, to move forward. We know that we are still far from where we want to go. There are still many challenges to overcome, but the little progress that we've made on this path has already brought significant advances to the population and give us encouragement to continue our journey. So as advances, I will briefly highlight to you the strengthening of the social participation in the search for solutions to local challenges, the improvement of social and environment indicators, and the transparency in public data. Also, the awareness of issues such as climate change, gender, and generation. So, Aline, I have only one question for Barcelona. That is, what are the lessons and the challenges faced in this process of the institutionalization in Barcelona?
Okay, thank you, Patricia. Michael, I will ask you to hold this question. Don't forget it, because we also have some reactions here and some questions for you. So just 1 second, please. So Diana, please.
Hi, Michael. So, you know, in Spain, we used to have two great plans in the city. One was the strategic plan that took care of the socio-economic aspects of the city, what was the vision of the city, what was the social and economic transformation that the city wanted for the next, and it was 15 years, 20 years. Each city was doing a different strategic plan. And then, of course, we have the urban plan, which in Spain is the PEGO, the one that tells you where you can build, where you cannot build, and which kind of uses do you give to land. And that is compulsory. I think it's 15 years, no? Now, every 15 years is compulsory for the city to do a new urban plan, which is like the physical structure, where many cities have used the strategic plan like a social economic planning, like what, you know, let's say the software of the city, and then landing and make it reality through the urban plan that was like the hardware of the city. So my question is, because yesterday Bogota was mentioning that they want to bring this criteria of inclusion, sustainability, caring city within the urban plan. So that is very complicated because you know how is the negotiation of an urban plan. You have to take stakeholders, negotiate with the region in some cases in the central government who is the one who approved. So my question is where the Agenda 2030 as a plan, comes in relation to these two. Now, do you have a strategic plan, or you have the Agenda 2030, which is your strategic plan? And then how are you proposing to bring this to the urban plan? Because that is the ball game. The moment that you're bringing SDGs into the urban plan, then is when things really start happening at the city level. So that's my question to you. I'm going to give it to David, and then like that we can give you the floor to respond. Thank you very much. Moltes gracias.
That was a fantastic question, Diana. So I'm really looking forward to the answer to that question. As a fellow town planner, I really get where you are coming from there. So thank you. Now, my question is related to the solar panels on all roofs for free and the public-private partnership you've developed there. So that is an excellent initiative. Now, thinking about what the others were saying, and also going back to your issue about only 30% of the Spanish population has heard of the SDGs, but what's important is how many know of its values. So one way perhaps to move this agenda forwards is to, start to have peer pressure and competition amongst cities for being the best in this area. And this is you can develop urban pride, and in many places people feel as attached to their city and their regional identity as they do to their national identity. So I wondered, have you been engaged in any global networks on this? I know other cities that are doing similar things in other continents. Are you also aware of them? And how can we create some kind of competition to be the best at this? That's my question to you.
Go ahead.
Okay, hard questions. But let's start with the last one. Okay, so regarding about the global networks and how we work with them. We are in several global networks. We are in UCLG, we are in C40, we are in CDM, we are in several global networks. And regarding this competition, I will say that there's a very good competition that appears, at least in Spain and in Europe, is that there's each year there's like a KPI review, a review of KPIs regarding how the cities are reaching the agenda, the 2030 agenda, and that's something that it's done by the SDNS and also by the European Commission. And from our part, we're more than happy to participate in this kind of process. Despite this, I'm not aware of other competition process, but I think it's good to have this competition process. We are creating this prize of cities regarding Barcelona regarding the 2030 agenda, and that will not be a competition, but might be interesting for the other cities. But I see that you take the micro, so maybe I was not answering what you expected, or So please
You
go ahead.
were, but it was just to, you were answering, and thank you very much indeed. But just to kind of broaden the point, and not for you to answer necessarily, but it's great that there is that European Union thing, and that you're involved with UCLG, as we all are. But I was thinking more in terms of the general population outside, so that this really becomes a political issue, so that people know, well, we are one of the winners in this, you know. So it becomes something beyond the bureaucrats and those that are involved.
Okay.
I mean, because that's when we will really get the change to scale, when people vote because Barcelona is one of the best in this, and that's, you know, something that it should be part of the mayor's election campaign, and we're not quite there yet, I don't think, with these things.
We're not quite yet there for sure, and when let me go to our example of our policy that we want to create this prize of Barcelona. Here we want to recognize champions that we have already existing organizations that are willing by their own to reach the agenda, and we want to recognize them. We want to show them to the rest and make them an example for the rest. So this maybe will help more people to be engaged with the 2030 agenda. But we will see. So the other question regarding how lives the 2030 agenda with our different plans. I would say the 2030 agenda is like a kind of a strategic plan. And it's on top of other sectorial plans that we have, like the economic one. We have, like, I don't know, I would say that more than 20 strategic plans, sectorial strategic plans in Barcelona. So we're on top of that, and at the same time, we expect to adapt also our 2030 agenda with the plans that will be reviewed, because some of them right now are finishing, are designed before 2030. So once they will be designed by 2030 or afterwards, we will adapt the agenda here. We see the 2030 agenda in Barcelona like a strategic plan, and from here, our urban plan, the PG, I don't know how to say it in English, it's very well. The urban strategic plan, we expected that it will adapt to this agenda, because basically what we're saying and trying to explain in Barcelona that the 2030 agenda is just saying what is the vision of the future we want. The more specific detail, we put a specific detail, but at the end, the more specific detail is in the specific plans that we have in each department. And we go with them, we do the evaluation, but they have the specificity here. And finally, for the question regarding our lessons and challenges that we have learned during the process, I would say, I think that the more important lesson is that we have to work breaking silos inside the city council and inside and together with the organization. Breaking silos, I will even say not breaking silos, breaking walls, and being able to work together and define policies together and put together, for example, this solar panel project, we put together the financial structure of the part of the government that normally do not participate in any kind of policy of the government in any kind, and together with the energy department, with the housing department. And at the beginning, it was like science fiction. It was like, what the hell is this guy talking about putting all this and doing as an investor and talking with banks and other investors? What are you doing? What are you saying? Now they understand, and now from here we're defining other policies. So I would say the more important thing is trying to make a very transversal point of view, of the transversal vision, breaking silos, breaking walls. And another thing, do not be afraid about innovation. We have to innovate. And a very important thing about innovation, we have innovation inside our city councils sometimes, but if not, we have to take it from outside, from our partner, our alliance, as Nicola was saying about these partnerships that we need to build together.
Okay, thank you so much. We have some minutes left, so I just want to give the opportunity for a final round. So I'm going back to Laura, to Nicolas and Patricia, also for a last thought to be shared with our participants here, and then we close with you, Michael, with a final word as well. So Laura, please just share with us one final thought, what to expect, what comes next, which are your opportunities or challenges that you want to share with us.
Bueno, nosotros en este momento el gran desafío que tenemos es empezar justamente a armar esta bajada de metas y de indicadores y de sistema de indicadores para empezar a poder medir el impacto de estos 200 proyectos que se presentaron al presupuesto quinquenal como línea, o sea, tenemos una línea base y ahora empezamos a poder medir los impactos que estamos teniendo o que vamos a tener efectivamente en las metas de los ODS. Ese es uno de nuestros primeros desafíos. Y nuestro segundo desafío es bajarlo más a las localidades. Además de las capacitaciones a lo que es la interna de la institución y la ciudadanía, que es como el pilar segundo que mencionaba Miquel.
Nicola, 1 minute, please, a final message.
I think it's crucial that we continue to work together. So to me, stakeholders engagement is really the key issue. And then let's try also to work together in terms of monitoring system. Otherwise, we will not be able to compare ourselves, and then all this exercise will not be useful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Patricia, please, 1 minute.
Well, I only would like to highlight that the UN Development Agendas, they are excellent framework for strategic planning in all the areas that we have to face in the public administration. It also helps us to, as it was said, to break the silos, to break the walls, to integrate all the agendas and to have a holistic view about the local problems that we have to face.
Thank you. Thank you, Miquel. Please, 1 minute, and then we are going to close.
I would say that the main challenge, despite keeping pushing and defining policies that help us reaching the agenda, the SDGs, the great challenge is that the design of the budget of our organization is done on the SDG dimension. And in that sense, what I say is that being able to change our budget priorities regarding how far are we from reaching one SDG or another one.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you all so much. This was really a very insightful session. So I hope to see you all very soon, and thank you for that.